The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your financial advisor. Hi there, I'm E, and this is Not Your Father's 2 Cents. It's election day, and millions of Americans will be headed to the polls to cast their vote for the next president. For months, we've been subjected to countless ads and smear campaigns against each candidate, all in an attempt to motivate the American people to get out and vote. Now, despite those efforts, there are a considerable amount of Americans who choose not to vote at all. A report from 538 found between 35 and 60% of eligible voters choose not to cast a ballot in any given election. According to CNBC, almost 100 million Americans did not vote in the 2016 election. That's more than the number of votes Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton received. There are a number of reasons why people may choose not to vote. They may be unsatisfied with their options, mistrust the system, feel overlooked in political conversations, or believe their vote simply doesn't matter. Whatever the reason, choosing not to vote is your choice, but could it come at a financial cost? Joining me today is Dan White of Daniel A. White and Associates. So what has this election cycle been like for you and your clients? Have you noticed a lot of people coming in freaking out about what this could mean for their finances, or what have you seen?
Not a lot. I mean, I think people, whatever you want to call it, the political season is a necessary evil.
Yeah.
I think, a lot of people looking at an election is what is the lesser of two evils. I think people get tired of the political ads. I mean, gosh, we've been bombarded for probably three to 4 months with nothing but political ads. So, and the signs all over everybody's property and lawns. I think people get tired of that. But from depending upon what side you're on, sad to say, but the country is so polarized and so divided. At this point, I think people think if one candidate wins, their finances are going to go down the tubes, and other people feel if the other candidate wins, their finances are going to go down the tubes. So, I don't think I think people are worried both ways by the outcome.
Yeah, I feel like, especially with the ads and all these rallies kind of at the last minute, it almost seems like one side is trying to fearmonger the other.
Yeah, that's really what it is. And quite honestly, you really don't know what to believe. Because you'll have one ad saying the candidate, whatever candidate it is, whether it's for the Senate or the president or whatever, they'll be saying, they're out on record as saying this, and then the candidate will come on the very next ad and say the complete opposite. So,
yeah.
What do you believe? I don't know if there's any truth in advertising anymore,
A lot of it is just campaigning. Like when Biden ran in 2020, I think a big pull of his was free college, But how much does I guess a national election impact your personal finances?
A lot of times it really doesn't. What people fail to realize is they can make promises till the cow comes home when they're running for office. But the fact of the matter is that the president cannot pass laws, that's the Senate and the House of Representatives. So for anything to get approved, I think they're equally as important, if not more important, than the presidency. The president may get up there and promise all kinds of things to people. But again, if they can't get it passed in the Senate or the House, it doesn't mean anything. So to me, it's all just kind of rhetoric unless they can get it passed.
Have you experienced anything like the political rhetoric we've seen in the last 10 years in the past, or do you think it's been like really hyped up since probably like 2016?
Yeah, I think it has gotten worse. I mean, it's funny. I watched the debates, and I remember 25 years ago when you had a debate, it was very civil. The candidates would put forth their proposals. This is what we want to do. This is why we want to do it. We think that'll help the American public. The past 10, 12 years, it's been nothing but kind of mudslinging, and this is what they're doing wrong. And it's more about what the other party's doing wrong than what they're going to do to fix it. And that's kind of disheartening because, you really want to, hey, we got problems in the country. We all know we have problems. How are you going to fix them? That's the bottom line.
Right. Another thing, too, that I find interesting, kind of going back to what you said about, like, Congress is the one that, really has the power here. But we spend so much time talking about each candidate and what they will do to help or not help that I think it turns people off from voting if they don't like either one. But also on the ballot are those like candidates running for Senate and running for the House and then local elections. What would you tell someone if they were like, I just don't think I'm going to vote. I don't like either candidate.
Yeah, I think that's a big mistake. When you look at the size of the country, I mean, you want to look at, let's say in the presidential election, there was probably, and I don't know have the exact numbers in front of me, but let's just say there was 150, 160 million votes. And if you say that the winner is going to win by 500,000 votes or something, that's not a big. The elections have gotten very, very tight, and this one seems to be along the same path. And then when you take that down on a smaller level to like a senator or a House of Representatives for a particular state, you have far less votes being cast. And the margin of victory may be even slimmer. So to say your vote doesn't count, if you've got somebody winning by 800 to 1,000 votes, I would beg to disagree. I would say every vote counts.
Yeah. Are there a lot of like clients or people in your personal life who are tapping out of this election?
No, I think, it's funny. We deal with people near retirement, and let's face it, who votes?
Right.
I mean, you have a lot of older people that vote, because they know over the years, you can't really complain about the system if you didn't want to do anything about it. And how do you do something about it? You vote, So we don't really get that from our client base because they're all, kind of 50, 55 and older, and I think the vast majority of them do in fact vote.
Do you have any thoughts as to why that is? Is it because, they're nearing retirement? Do you think it's like a financial worry of like, oh my gosh, is my Social Security going to be safe and all of that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. When they start kicking around, I mean, everybody kind of follows the news and they know the Social Security Trust Fund is running out of money by 2034, and seniors are cognizant of that. Especially people who are retired. They're watching the news, they're reading the papers. They're on a fixed income, and they know that. So when there's news about one of their sources of their retirement income, they're definitely paying attention. And again, I don't know what to believe on the news because so-and-so's going to cut it, so-and-so's not going to, and then who's fact checking these ads? That's the problem. But I think older Americans, by and large, do vote because a lot of the issues that they're talking about are going to impact them. Yeah.
I also know Biden and Harris's economic plans have been kind of a hot topic recently, and a lot, but there's studies that have come out that have said like both are going to get us into a deficit. I highly doubt this is possible, but if there is somebody who's planning to vote on Tuesday who's still kind of on the fence, do you have thoughts about what they should consider when it comes to those economic plans?
The next president, whoever it may be, I think either one is going to be in for very significant fiscal challenges when they take office. I mean, we've got record debt levels. We've got structural deficits. The interest on our debt alone is surging and is becoming our largest expense. And then you got the insolvency of critical trust fund programs. So the national debt that we're running right now, I mean, we went up like $2 trillion in the last 100 days. These guys are spending money like they've never spent money before. and our debt threatens to slow economic growth, boost interest rates and payments, weaken national security. So the sad part is neither major candidate running has put forward any plan to address the rising debt. And in fact, when you look at the analysis of the candidates' tax and spending plans, either plan would likely further increase deficits and debt above levels projected under current law. You know, it's interesting. During the campaign, Vice President Harris has proposed to expand the child tax credit, other tax credits, increase support for housing, $25,000 for first-time home buyers, lower taxes on tips. She called for spending and tax breaks on child care, education, long-term care, paid leave. I mean, it's great that they're making all these promises. How are they going to pay for them?
Yeah.
You know, that's what people need to think about. Meanwhile, President Trump, on the other hand, he wants to modify and extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, cut taxes for corporations, increase military spending, strengthen the security, border security. And he also proposed ending taxation of tip income, overtime pay, and Social Security benefits. I mean, yeah, again, sounds wonderful.
Right.
How are they paying for it? That's the question. I mean, yeah, it's like being on Oprah. You get a new car. You get a new car. You know.
Right. Everybody gets everything.
Everybody gets everything, but who's paying for it? That's the problem. So, and when you look at their economic proposals, each one of them is going to not cut the deficit, but significantly increase it. And that's a problem.
What do you see happening with our debt? Because it seems like, and it is, it's just climbing and climbing.
I'll give you some numbers that completely blow me away. In 2007, you do the math, our country was 231 years old in 2007. We were $7 trillion in debt, $7 trillion. So it took us 231 years to get $7 trillion in debt. By 2020, 13 years later, we were $20 trillion in debt.
Oh my gosh.
So in 13 years, we added $13 trillion. And in the last 4 years, I mean, granted we had COVID, we added $16 trillion in 4 years. It took us 231 years to get $7 trillion in the hole. And in the last 16 years, we've added $29 trillion.
That's just incomprehensible.
Mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing.
What do you think has caused it to rise so much so quickly?
I mean, I guess you know, you had the Great Recession in 2008. You know, everybody, you know, they had to bail out banks. They didn't have to, but they did. You know, and then they were, you know, they just keep spending. Then when you hit COVID, I mean, you shut down the economy for you mail checks out to everybody, living, dead, it didn't matter.
Right.
You know, and then they pass these spending bills. You know, the Inflation Protection. I mean, it's ridiculous for what they're spending, and it just you know, you need an adult. You need an adult in the room to stand up. None of us can do that on a personal level. If you make $100,000 a year, you can't spend $400.
Right.
I mean, it's basic economics. We can't do that. Why does the government think they can?
How does the national debt trickle down to, like, me, for example? Yeah,
I mean, you know, if you look about it, and whether it's on a personal level or on a governmental level, debt is consumption pulled forward. So instead of saying, hey, I want to buy that car and it's $40,000, well, I don't have $40,000, so I could wait 3 years or 4 years to save up the money, or I could just borrow it, and then I'm in the hole. I'm in debt, right? Well, the government's the same thing. And how does that impact the average person? Eventually, think about it. If the interest on the debt is now our biggest expense, which very quickly it will be, the interest on the debt will be more than what we spend on national security. it'll be more than what we spend on Social Security and Medicare. I mean, so if the government's got to pay the interest on this debt, it takes away from spending money on other things that the country needs. Okay, and if they're going to get it under control, quite frankly, they're going to have to start saying no. I mean, no different than you tell your kids all the time, no, we can't afford it, right? No, we can't do that.
We have McDonald's at home.
Yeah, exactly, but the government apparently is afraid to tell people that because that's not going to get them elected.
Right, exactly.
And the other problem is, these guys, they make all these promises. Like Trump, even if he gets elected, he knows, he's got 4 years. He'll let the next guy worry about it. I mean, it's always like kick the can down the road. They've been doing this for 15, 20 years. Hey, we'll just spend and keep people happy and then let the next guy worry about it. Well, at some point, you got to pay the piper.
Yeah. That's what it always kind of worries me, too, about the election is, they go out, they make all these promises, and they get people all riled up. There's no guarantee that they're going to get a second term, so how much change can really happen in 4 years? And then if they don't get reelected and you have, the other party in there, that could drastically change everything that they did. So at the end of the day, like, how much progress is really being made when we're constantly switching up?
Yeah, and actually think about it. They're not even working the whole 4 years because the fourth year they campaigned the whole stinking year, So,
right. Yeah, and then even when it once they get in January, I'm sure there's some months of kind of just learning the ropes of what they have to do. So it is kind of like, okay, how much is really being focused on trying to make the things that you said you would do actually happen?
Yeah, and I guess one other thing to throw out there, and I've talked about this for 20, 25 years. Every client I have seen, or everybody in 20 years has always said we need to have term limits in the Senate. We need to have term limits in it. This was never supposed to be a lifelong job. Politics is not a career. Okay.
Right.
And you got these guys in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, they're 85 years old. I mean, they've been Joe Biden. He's been there, 40, 50 years. If you had term limits, if you said, hey, you're a senator, you can do 8 years and that's it, maybe these guys would focus on doing what's right for the country and not necessarily on getting reelected because they know they can't.
Do you ever see that happening at all?
I'd love to say yes, but it hasn't happened yet. And for them to vote themselves out of a job, I don't really see it happening.
Yeah. I know another issue for a lot of people has been like higher costs of living, kind of coming off of the pandemic and everything. How do you see that changing maybe in the next 4 years? I know that's hard to predict.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't see it. I see probably inflation coming back around. I mean, for them to be cutting rates and the Fed cut the interest rates 50 basis points about a month ago, and they're projecting a couple more cuts. They think they have engineered this soft landing, but I think no matter who gets elected, no matter what they say, I think we're going to see inflation again. And inflation is, the stealth tax. You don't see it. You don't pay for it. It's just your money's worth less and less and less every day because goods and services cost that much more. So I think that's going to be a challenge as well. Moving forward is they wanted to get down to 2%. They never got to 2%, and now it's ticking higher. And they seem to be focused more on the job market than inflation. They think they've got inflation licked when I personally think it's going to come back again.
I don't want to think about that.
I hear you. The elephant in the room is certainly the debt. I mean, I just, coming across some numbers here, and, either one, it's the national debt currently stands at 99% of gross domestic product. It's projected to grow from 102% of GDP at the start of fiscal year 2026 to 125%. I mean, the debt will continue to grow faster than the economy under either candidate's plans, and in most scenarios will grow faster and higher than under current law. So to me, that's the big elephant in the room. Somebody's got to stand up, and neither candidate has even whispered any type of plan to rein in spending, and that to me is troublesome.
Maybe for somebody who is feeling uneasy about like how the election is going to turn out and who's going to get in, what would you tell them? I guess specifically maybe in regard to their finances.
The big thing everybody always focuses on in regards to personal finances is taxes. And, you have to look at it from the standpoint, if Harris gets in, odds are that, the Trump tax cuts will go away. And in my opinion, the Trump tax cuts, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, did benefit the middle class quite a bit. So, and again, it depends on Congress, because if you have a split Congress where the Democrats hold the Senate and the Republicans hold the House, or vice versa, the odds are pretty good you won't get anything done. It's called gridlock,
Right.
So if the Congress is split at the end of next week, it doesn't really matter what proposals the candidates have, because you're going to have a tough time passing either one of them. And if Congress does nothing, which, I always kind of joke with people, what is Congress really good at? Doing nothing. Then the Trump tax cuts go by the wayside at the end of next year, and I think taxes are going to go up for just about everybody. Now, if one party holds both sides of the House, if the Democrats sweep, I think taxes may still go up because, obviously her tax proposal is more on the wealthy and corporations. I think if Trump gets a sweep, he's going to try to extend the tax cuts that he implemented 8 years ago, and I don't think much would change.
I don't know if maybe you have any thoughts on this, but why do you think when we're in an election cycle, why do you think we focus so much on I know it's the president, but why don't we talk more about the people who are running for Congress? You might see an ad here or there or get a flyer in the mail, but we don't ever focus on them when they actually play a big role in what actually gets done.
Yeah, I'm in Pennsylvania, so I think we when Pennsylvania is, I think the whole country rides on Pennsylvania is what we hear. It's the battleground state, and Michigan to a certain extent, and Georgia and Arizona. These are the key states that may swing the election one way or the other. So I think in those types of states where somebody's up for an election and you think that could move the needle a little bit, I think you do hear more about the candidates running for Senate and the House of Representatives. In states where, maybe you don't have as many electoral, or there's absolutely no way that they're going to switch from a Democratic to a Republican or a Republican to a Democrat, it's probably not as pronounced. And then the sad part is, a lot of people, they'll go into the booth and it might be, hey, I'm all red or I'm all blue. They don't even know who's running, but they know they're a registered Democrat or they know they're a registered Republican, and they just pull the lever for the whole slate.
Yeah, they just go straight.
Whether that's good or bad, they're not really voting with their brains. They're just voting with, hey, this is how I vote.
What would your 2 cents be to anyone who doesn't want to vote because they're not satisfied with either candidate, or think that their vote doesn't matter, or feel overwhelmed and just don't want to deal with it? What would you tell them?
I think for a number of years, and I've kind of approached the election too, are we in love with either candidate? I don't think anybody's in love with either candidate. They both have significant flaws. We know that going in, but to say, hey, I don't like either candidate, I'm not going to vote, then don't sit there and complain about the state of the country or what's happening to you from a tax or an inflation standpoint, because you had a chance on November the 5th to go in there and try to change something, and you opted not to. So I would say for people that are on the fence and saying, hey, I don't like either one, again, to me, it's a lesser of two evils. Which one do you think is going to be best for the country? And more importantly, which one do you think is going to be best for you? Are they going to be perfect? No. Are they going to give you, every little thing on your wish list? No, they're not. But you have to look at the big picture and say, hey, is our country better off with this candidate, or do you think our country is better off with this candidate? And if you don't take the initiative to go out there and do your civic duty to do that, then I don't think you have any reason to complain because you didn't do your job.
All right. That does it for this episode of Not Your Father's 2 Cents. Sources used in this episode will be linked in the description. And I want to wish you all a happy election day. And I want to remind you to take a deep breath and remember everything's going to be okay. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll meet you back here next week.